Welcome back. Happy May 18th, 2021. Chris Cuomo, I was about to say the dumber one or the more incredible one, but then I had to stop myself as I'm not so sure. But last night, Chris Cuomo went on a rant against the Supreme Court taking up a Mississippi anti-abortion statute. Cuomo said this, quote, "This is about legislating to the far-right white fright vote. This is about legislating to the far-right white fright vote," close quote. Notice the new dispensation. Anything the left wants is anti-white racism or anti-white supremacy, be it about the border or energy or the climate or crime. You name it. Race explains everything, and race only in one direction. That is to say, only one race is bad and only one race can be good. And everything bad or undesirable is ascribed to one race. That's why the word white has made such a comeback. As one Austrian-born writer put it in 1925, quote, "the moral mildew of the chosen race," close quote. All of this is one reason, but one, that we get perversions in public policy, perversions in science, education, economics, law, you name it. And when it comes to abortion policy, few things could be less true than efforts to limit abortions being about legislating to the far-right white fright vote. You see, it turns out if white people wanted to limit black life, they would support more abortion, not less. But precisely because most pro-life white people do not think about life in terms of color, which is to say, do not think about life the way the Cuomos think, precisely because of Cuomo racism, precisely because of this, more blacks are dying. As one recent story crunched the data, the CDC has released data showing that the black abortion rate is currently nearly 4 times greater than the white abortion rate and 2.15 times higher than the Hispanic abortion rate. These numbers reveal how abortion is disproportionately targeting the black community. The CDC also reveals that the black abortion rate exceeded all other races. Black abortion rate 25.1, Hispanic 11, white 6. Not only did it exceed all other races, it exceeded all other races combined. In other words, as Walt Blackman has put it, when you use those percentages, it indicates that of the over 44 million abortions since 1973 Roe v. Wade's Supreme Court ruling, 19 million black babies were aborted. Do you realize, with a black population in America today of 37 million, this means because of abortion policy in the United States, there are 51% less black Americans in our world today? Before I ask you who the real geneticists are here, who the real blanchers of society are here, let me give you some more from Walt Blackman. 79% of Planned Parenthood's surgical abortion facilities are located within walking distance of minority communities. In the past, we criticized things like the tobacco industry for targeting young people with their advertising. Recently, the nicotine vape industry has been criticized for similar practices. The prevalence of abortion providers in African American neighborhoods indicates the abortion industry is targeting as well. It smacks of the eugenics-linked past of Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger and her views of contraception and abortion as ways of diminishing the black population. The impact on our black communities is hard to fathom. According to the Guttmacher Institute, in an average year, 360,000 black babies are aborted. CDC statistics show that 287,000 plus black deaths occurred from all other causes, excluding abortion in a given year. So by these numbers, abortion is the leading cause of death among blacks in America. And yet we who try to prevent or curb these things are doing so for the far right white vote, according to the Cuomos. Nice work if you can get it, doctor. But let me just end this thought with something Michael Novak once wrote. Abortion has made a silent generation of the black community. Silent as a tomb. Abortion has swept through the black community like a scythe, cutting down nearly every fourth member. This is precisely why, Ronald Reagan in 1983 would write a book on abortion, the only sitting president to write a book so far as I know, and he titled it Abortion and the Conscience of a Nation, analogizing the fight for life with the fight to end slavery. Ronald Reagan was not alone, but here is how he closed his book. Good old, moderate, easygoing Ronald Reagan. I quote, Abraham Lincoln recognized that we could not survive as a free land when some men could decide that others were not fit to be free and should therefore be slaves. Likewise, we cannot survive as a free nation when some men decide that others are not fit to live and should be abandoned to abortion or infanticide. There is no cause more important for preserving that freedom than affirming the transcendent right to the life of all human beings, the right without which no other right has any meaning. Close quote. Note I said earlier Ronald Reagan was not alone. Here was a very famous black civil rights activist in 1977 writing in the Human Life Review. Writing, not speaking. Off the cuff. Quote, there are those who argue that the right to privacy is of a higher order than the right to life. I do not share that view. I believe that life is not private, but rather it is public and universal. If one accepts the position that life is private and therefore you have the right to do with it as you please, one must also accept the conclusion of that logic. And that was the premise of slavery. You could not protest the existence or treatment of slaves on the plantation because that was private and therefore outside of your right to concern. Another area that concerns me greatly, namely because I know how it has been used with regard to race, is the psycholinguistics involved in this whole issue of abortion. If something can be dehumanized through rhetoric and used to describe through eponymous words, then the major battle has been won. Think of the word slave. Think of the N-word. The first step was to distort the image of us as human beings in order to justify that which they wanted to do and not even feel like they had done anything wrong. Those advocates of taking life prior to birth do not call it killing or murder. They call it abortion. They further never talk about aborting a baby because that would imply something human. Rather, they talk about a fetus. Fetus sounds less than human, and therefore its doing away with can be justified. In conclusion, even if one does take life by aborting the baby, as a minister of Jesus Christ, as the civil rights activist wrote, I must also inform and or remind you that there is a doctrine of forgiveness. The God I serve is a forgiving God. The men who killed President John F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. can be forgiven. Everyone can come to the mercy seat and find forgiveness and acceptance. But, and this may be the essence of my argument, suppose one is so hard-hearted and so indifferent to life until he assumes that there is nothing for which to be forgiven. What happens to the mind of a person and the moral fabric of a nation that accepts the aborting of the life of a baby without a pang of conscience? What kind of person and what kind of society will we have years hence if life can be taken so casually? It is that question, the question of our attitude, our value system, and our mindset with regard to the nature and worth of life itself that is the central question confronting mankind. Failure to answer that question affirmatively will leave us with a hell right here on earth. Close quote. That civil rights activist was Jesse Jackson. Running for president as a Democrat, later he changed his views, or had to, but it doesn't make his previous position wrong. It's just that his truth changed. The truth didn't. Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, wrote of eugenics that it would reestablish the balance between the, quote, fit and unfit. She had Adolf Hitler's genetics advisor, Ernst Rudin, write a defense of eugenics for her magazine. Last year, the New York offices of Planned Parenthood, in response to a BLM moment, took Margaret Sanger's name off their building, and that was a pretty good start. There are some other starts an advanced society might think about taking, perhaps remembering all that took place in Germany in the 1920s and 1930s and 1940s would be a good one. Professor Robert George of Princeton puts it this way: the Holocaust, the Shoah, did not begin with the mass killings of Jews or other ethnic or religious minorities or even Hitler's political opponents. It began with the killing of the handicapped and infirm. They were, according to Nazi ideology, useless eaters, parasites, lebenswertes Leben, lives unworthy of life. Same phrases Margaret Sanger used. It is important to remember that this eugenic doctrine did not originate with Nazis. It began with polite, urbane, well-educated, sophisticated people who saw social hygiene via, among other methods, as representing progress in modernity. They wanted to ditch the old Judeo-Christian belief in the sanctity of all human life and replace it with what they regarded as a more advanced and rational philosophy, progress, and all that. A good start for the precincts of CNN and the Cuomos to engage in true progress might just be for them to look at and read a little history. And in doing so, history not through the lens of grievance as Marx instructs, but as it really happened, because sometimes the grievance industry usually comes from the losers in history, which is why it is so ironic for me to see so-called progressives today engage in and deploy the same rhetoric in history as other massive moral losers in world history, like the Confederacy and the Third Reich. But that is what they do. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.